After 11 years away, I flew home for my father's funeral. Mom opened the door, but her new husband greeted me with his fist. He said this wasn't my house anymore. He had no idea I still owned half the workshop and had the claws that would destroy him. Hey, Reddit. My mom married a con man after my dad died, and they tried to sell off his workshop like it was a yard sale. I thought I'd left that mess behind, but when they came for my father's legacy, I flew home and reminded them who actually owned the deed. Before I get into how it all went down, let me start from the beginning. I'm Grant Morgan, 34, architect. I draw towers for other men's names. But I grew up inside a boat hole. Cedar ribs, salt air, my father's laugh. Samuel Morgan built wooden schooners on the Maine coast until his heart quit mid-project. My mother, Claire, remarried inside a year. Her new husband, Dale Rohr, brought a son my age, Jace, all charm and selfies. I left, built my own life in Chicago. We talk maybe twice a year. Small talk, cold, family, but in name only. My loft sat above the river, steel and glass. The kind of place you keep clean so no one mistakes you for sentimental. Blueprints spread across the drafting table, a city skyline waiting to exist. I closed the file, poured 2 fingers of rye, and let the lights of the loop smear across the window. The silence was earned, the good kind. At 11:30 p.m. my phone chimed. Subject line, selling the workshop from Claire. The message was short. Dale and I have an offer. His investors are excited. We need your signature to finalize. You'll receive compensation of $10,000. Attachment. A release form. $10,000 for half of my father's life. They knew exactly what they were doing with that number. A second chime. CC Jace Rohr. Nostalgia doesn't pay rent, bro. Don't hold up progress. The glass hit the counter softly. No anger, just clarity. The sort of moment when you realize the cut is deliberate. A flash of memory sharp as the scent of varnish. Dad at his bench, sleeves rolled, eyes narrowed on a line he was scoring. Measure twice, cut once, never a saying, a commandment. I forwarded the email to Harlan Vega, our family's old lawyer. One line, lock everything. Then I opened my archive folder. Morgan property deed and addenda. There it was, the clause I wrote at 19 with my father watching. A recorded restrictive covenant that runs with the land. We attached Exhibit A. Definitions borrowed from state boat building standards. So handcrafted, master level, and prefabricated weren't poetry. They were terms of art. I wrote it to keep investors honest. It still held the force of iron. I scrolled through proof. Tax receipts for the last 3 years. My account, my payments, wire confirmations, $85,000 restoration funding 4 years ago, title page with both our signatures, everything airtight. I set the laptop aside and slid open the bottom drawer. Inside a small leather pouch, my father's brass compass, edges smoothed, needles still steady. I turned it once in my palm and felt something line up in me. He sold the wrong man short, I said to the quiet. Flight tab open. One way to Portland, Maine, first departure, a rental truck. Motel near the harbor. I typed a reply to Claire. Keep everything in place. Sent the clock read 11:58. Chicago moved outside the glass like a slow tide of light. I rinsed the glass, flipped it on the rack, and checked my phone again. Jay's face filled the screen. Roaring launch soon. He posed beside a gleaming fiberglass hull. Hashtags about innovation and legacy stacked underneath. Behind him, a beam painted to look like oak. I zoomed in, MDF factory edge visible. I saved the post to a folder labeled evidence and laughed once. The loft returned to stillness. I pulled the go bag from the closet. Boots, jeans, flannel, flashlight, hard case for documents, compass pouch in the side pocket, gloves coiled on top. I added the folder with printouts of the deed, tax records, and a checklist, clause, tax restoration cons, a clean plan. Before sleeping, I stood at the window again. Down below, a tugboat cut through black water. The wake spread and disappeared under the bridges. My father used to say, every hull leaves a mark even if you can't see it. Maybe that's what legacy really is, the part that pushes the water after you're gone. I lay down without turning on the TV. The city hummed through the glass. I didn't replay the emails. I didn't picture faces. Just numbers, steps, proof. Precision is the calmest kind of revenge. The alarm never got a chance. I was up before dawn. Coffee, shower, boots. I checked the folder, grabbed the bag, locked the door. Street air cold, clean. The rideshare slid to the curb. I nodded once to the driver and watched the skyline fade into the mirror. O'Hare at night ran like a machine. Ticket, security, gate. On the red eye, I took the aisle seat and opened my folder. PDFs lit the screen. Deed scans, tax receipts, bank wires, every file had the same rhythm. Proof first, comment second. Old emails with my father read like blueprints. Short, direct, no fluff, beam order, clamp count. He didn't write about love. He wrote about precision. The flight attendant offered water. I nodded, drank, kept working. The deed file opened under my thumb. Same ink I'd watched the clerk stamp 11 years ago. Back then, cedar dust clung to our arms. The fan hummed and my father said, "Grain tells you where it wants to go. You listen, then you guide." Back in the cabin, the glow of the screen found page 8. The artisan clause sat in dense type. No romance, just force. Restrictive use covenant. The property may be used only for the design and manufacture of custom wooden vessels built by traditional methods on site. Definitions. Exhibit A. Handcrafted means joinery, fairing, and finishing performed primarily by hand tools and small portable power tools on site. Numerically controlled machining or molded processes are prohibited except for incidental jigs and templates. Master level means direct supervision by a listed craftsperson with at least 10 years of documented boat building experience. Prefabricated means any off-site molded hull, plug, kit, or mass-produced component not custom cut for a named vessel under this covenant. Permitted incidental storage. Commercially available hardware or supplies less than 48 hours for an on-site build. Breach. Any sale, assembly, or storage of prefabricated craft or components is a material breach. The parties acknowledge irreparable harm and consent to immediate injunctive relief, specific performance, and recovery of costs and fees. Bond is waived to the extent permitted by law. We'd recorded it with the county legal description, covenant, and Exhibit A. Enough for a TTRO the minute someone tried a yard sale. I highlighted the section headings and tagged them for quick pull in a hearing. I attached the clause to a new email draft for Harlan Vega and parked it in Outbox until landing. Another email thread. Foundation reinforcement load calculation. A PDF of my old structural notes on the 1940s beams. Calculations held steady. The restoration invoice matched the spec list. Marine-grade fasteners. Epoxy brands we trusted. Kiln-dried stock. I compared it to the bank transfer that never reached the contractor. The gap glared. I flagged the wire details and the contractor's unpaid invoice for Harlan, routing numbers, dates, amounts, all he'd need for subpoenas. The cabin dimmed. I opened Jace's social feed. His handcrafted promo showed Philip screws sitting proud on veneer. No plugs, no countersink, fake. I took screenshots, circled the evidence, and dropped them into a folder labeled for court and for laughs. Another clip showed heritage oak frames, particle board under gloss. I laughed once, low. He'd never even sanded wood in his life. I wrote 3 lines in my notes app. What's at stake if I do nothing? The name on the door, the craft, and the work. My father's story told wrong. That was enough. I scrolled through the deed again. My signature beside my father's. His S carried a break from an old scar on his finger. A reminder of a lifetime spent cutting clean. I photographed it under the dim cabin light and closed the file. The map showed us over Michigan. I double-checked the tax receipts. 3 years all paid from my account. Enough proof to shut down any ownership dispute. A marketing email pinged. Roaring pre-launch access, fiberglass holes on dollies, bad lighting, fake pride. I zoomed in on a transom. Hairline crack under gel coat, weak resin mix. I saved it. They couldn't even fake quality. Right. In my notes, I built a short witness list. Marianne Halt for documents, the old crew for the shop's condition, one supplier for Samuel's usual stock. No padding, only what mattered. The cabin went quiet except for the engines. I pulled my father's compass from my pocket. The needle swung north and held steady. It didn't care about family politics, only direction. I closed my eyes until the descent jolted me awake. Clouds rolled under the wing, dark and silver. I opened my phone, reviewed my itinerary. Portland arrival at dawn. Certified copies from the county clerk, then straight to Harlan's office. As the plane leveled, Jace's newest video slid into my feed. Him at a bar calling himself a visionary of heritage design. I muted it. The comments split, some cheering, others suspicious. I bookmarked the skeptics. They might matter later. Wheels hit the runway. The reverse thrusters roared. I waited for silence before sending the message I'd written hours ago. File injunction, 8:00 a.m. meeting. The phone buzzed once with confirmation. Portland waited. So did the reckoning. The sky over Portland was the color of cold iron. When I drove north, the road curved toward the coast, lined with pine and the smell of brine. My truck tires hissed over wet asphalt. The GPS led me to the turnoff where my father's hand-painted sign used to hang. It wasn't there. In its place stood a new one. Raw marine chrome letters bolted crooked onto a plywood frame. The sea breeze made it squeak. The gate was open. I pulled in. Gravel crunched under the tires. The building ahead still had the same shape, but the soul was gone. The workshop had always looked alive. Oak beams, wide bay doors, the hum of saws and salt air mixing with cedar. Now the air smelled of resin, solvent, and cheap varnish. Inside, light glared off white-painted walls. My father's hand-rubbed oak beams were covered in dull gray. The floor was sticky. Plastic-handled drills hung where forged chisels once rested. The racks were cluttered with prefab boat kits, shrink-wrapped and stacked. The wood dust had been replaced with fiberglass grit. "Grant Morgan!" a voice barked. Didn't expect the prodigal architect himself. Dale Rohr stepped from behind a stack of hull molds, belly forward, voice loud enough to impress the two workers pretending to sweep. He wore a branded polo that strained at the buttons and an expression that begged for applause. "Nice empire," I said. He grinned. "That's right, my empire. Investors love what we've done. We're taking this place into the future." The word future came out like a cough. Behind him, Jay stood on a work table holding his phone up for a video. "We're here live at the new Roar Marine facility," he said into the camera, sprinkling sawdust with his hand for effect. "Heritage meets innovation." I looked at the handful of sawdust. It was from MDF, not cedar. "You even fake the dust now?" Jace grinned. "Gotta feed the algorithm, bro." The word bro landed heavier than he intended. I didn't respond. From the office doorway, Claire appeared. Thin, anxious, posture tight. "Grant," she said softly, like testing a language she'd forgotten. "You didn't tell us you were coming." I didn't think I needed to ask. She folded her arms. "This isn't a fight, it's just business. You left, remember?" I cut her off with a raised hand. "Don't rewrite history, Mom. I built a life. You built this." I gestured at the gray walls. Dale laughed. A loud fake sound that filled the space. "Your old man was stubborn," he said. "Refused to modernize. Great craftsman, sure, but he died broke. The man was dead weight. I'm just cleaning up." My pulse stayed steady. "You mean you're cashing in?" He pointed a finger at me. "Watch it, son. I'm not your son." He didn't like that. His face tightened. Jay stopped filming and smirked. "You city guys love talking tough once it's safe, huh?" I ignored him and walked the perimeter. My eyes moved from beam to beam, cataloging damage. Each detail told a story: the uneven brush lines on the paint, the missing lathe, the floor scars where my father's bench used to stand. The grain still showed faintly under the gray, trying to breathe. "Did you paint over the oak?" I asked. "Looks cleaner," Dale said. Cleaner? I repeated. You buried craftsmanship under primer. Times change, he said. No, I told him. People get lazy. Jace gave a short laugh. You really think anyone cares about handcraft anymore? I do, I said. And unfortunately for you, the law does too. Claire shifted in the doorway. Don't start threatening people. I faced her. I'm reminding you what you signed. Dale barked. That clause won't hold. I've got investors with lawyers who eat paper like that for breakfast. Then they'll choke on it. He puffed his chest, but I was already walking toward the office. The air there was stale. A cracked monitor glowed with spreadsheets labeled Rebrand Marketing Q1. The numbers dipped red after every row. A line item buried deep red Asset Liquidation Prep. Another tab showed a personal account routed offshore. Beside the desks sat a plastic storage bin filled with what used to belong on the shop walls. Samuel's drafting pencils, the brass bevel gauge, a photo of him beside the first boat he ever sold. A pegboard by the door held a ring of keys, forklift tags still on the fob. Someone had tossed it all in like garbage. I took the photo out, brushed sawdust from the glass, and slid it into my folder. Back in the main room, Dale shouted something about trespassing. I ignored him. I pulled my phone and began photographing every surface. Gray beams, missing fixtures, fake kits, each image stamped with time and location. I crouched by the pile of cheap fiberglass holes, took one close-up shot of a crack in the resin, then stood. Documentation, I said. I'll be back with paperwork. Claire's voice trembled. Why are you doing this to us? You did it to him, I said, tapping the photo in my folder. I'm just cleaning up. Dale snorted. You lawyers love your drama. You'll be begging to sell once the bills start stacking. Jace had the phone up again, filming. Ladies and gentlemen, he said to his audience, the arranged son who couldn't hack it in the family business returns to tell us how to build boats. Riveting stuff. I walked past him. Keep filming might save me a trip to the clerk's office. The parking lot was empty except for my truck and a forklift parked across the exit. A petty power play. Dale watched from the doorway, arms crossed, enjoying the show. I moved the cones aside, stepped into the office, and took the forklift key off the pegboard where they'd left it. I started it, eased it 10 feet off the apron, set the brake, left the key on the desk, and photographed the obstruction for the file. Then I pulled out. No horn, no glare, just composure. Dale shouted something about property rights. Jace laughed too loudly. Claire called after me, voice thin in the wind. I didn't answer. At the end of the drive, the cheap chrome sign squeaked again. I stopped long enough to photograph it against the morning sky. Then I drove out toward the highway, the smell of resin fading in the rear view. Behind me, their voices blended with the gulls, noise without substance. Ahead, the road bent inland toward town. My phone buzzed once, a message from Harland. Call me when you've seen it. I glanced back one last time. Gray paint, fake oak, borrowed pride. The kind of thing that collapses the first time it meets weather. I sent a quick reply. It's worse than expected, files building. Then I turned onto the main road, the compass in my pocket steady on north. The motel smelled like salt and old carpet. I'd claimed a corner table by the window, spread every document across it, and waited for Harlan Vega. He arrived 10 minutes early, coat damp from the rain, laptop under his arm. He didn't waste time. Claire signed authorizations at dawn, and the DA's office fired off subpoenas on an emergency basis. Bank compliance pushed statements by noon. The $85,000 hopped accounts in 4 moves. Harbor Credit, Bayview Savings, LedgePoint Capital LLC, Dale's personal credit line. Between the artisan clause and the photos of prefab stock, the judge signed an ex parte temporary restraining order before dawn, enjoining any sale, storage, or removal pending hearing. You weren't exaggerating, he said, pulling up a folder. They forged Claire's signature on a refinance and used it to secure a private loan. I flipped through the pages. My mother's name looped at the bottom of a document dated 18 months ago. The lender's letterhead belonged to a shell company, interest rates that screamed desperation, and the restoration money diverted. Harlan said, Your $85,000 wire never hit the contractor. Dale transferred it through 3 accounts, then paid off his personal credit line. Fraud, forgery, larceny, I said, tapping each page. That's a clean set. He nodded. And Claire, she'll claim ignorance. Dale did the paperwork. She signed what he put in front of her. I stacked the evidence neatly. The pile was growing, sharp-edged and heavy. By afternoon, the story broke. Architect sues his grieving mother over family workshop. The local paper's front page showed a photo of Claire outside the shop, tearful, framed by the Roar Marine sign. The article read like a script written by Jace, quotes about betrayal, greed, and destroying the future of Maine craftsmanship. The comment section burned. Chicago's snake, money-hungry son. I could almost hear Jace refreshing it, loving every click. At the diner that night, the glare started. An older man who'd once fished with my father stared holes through me. A waitress placed my plate harder than necessary. Someone outside tossed a beer can that bounced off my truck door. I finished my meal anyway. No words, no defense. I tipped well and left. Back at the motel, I saved the article to a new folder labeled Press Cum's False Narrative. Every quote, every name archived for later. I added one note at the top. Reboot with proof, not anger. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Mary Ann Halt, my mother's sister. Her text was simple. Come by at noon alone. Her house sat just inland. White paint and clean lines. No clutter. She opened the door before I knocked. No greeting, just a nod toward the kitchen. I've kept things, she said. She set a banker's box on the table. Inside were copies of deeds, original signatures, and receipts from Samuel's early years. Documents my mother never knew existed. Each file was dated, notarized, ordered. Why keep them? I asked. Because I knew one day someone would need to prove who actually built that place. She said he trusted me more than paperwork. I looked through the stack. Samuel's signature firm, deliberate, real. The break in the S from his old scar. I'd know it anywhere. This helps, I said. I figured, she replied. I don't like what she's become, but she's still my sister. Try not to hate her too much. I didn't answer. Hate wasn't useful. That night, the motel hall was quiet until I heard the metal click of my door handle. It jiggled once, paused, then again. I moved off the bed, silent. Footsteps retreated down the walkway. I opened the curtain a crack. The parking lot was empty except for my truck. I stepped outside, flashlight in hand. The front tire sagged flat. Behind the rear wheels, a small board bristled with nails, waiting. Childish, dirty. I crouched, took photos, and bagged the board with a motel towel. Inside, I called the sheriff's office and filed a report. Then I texted Harland. They're sloppy. The next day, I called Claire. Meet me, I said. Just us. She arrived at the diner mid-afternoon, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She didn't sit before talking. Why are you doing this to us, Grant? Dale's under pressure. You're making him desperate. You signed plenty, Mom. And the one loan you didn't, he forged it. That's not pressure, that's fraud. The rest were choices. You're cruel, she said. You think you're better than everyone because you have a degree and a big city job. I think I'm careful, I said. That's all. Her voice cracked. He's trying to build something. He's trying to steal something, I corrected. You don't understand what loneliness does. I understand theft, I said, and I don't negotiate respect. The waitress refilled our coffees, sensed the tension, and left fast. Claire pushed her chair back. You'll regret this. Not likely, I said. She stormed out, leaving her half-full cup trembling on the table. Outside, rain hit the street in steady lines. I watched her car turn onto the main road, then paid the bill. Back in the motel, I pulled a notepad from the drawer and wrote 2 lines in block print. Protect legacy, make it undeniable. Under it, a note to self, finish what he started. I set the pen down, turned off the light, and lay still. The horizon was barely gray when I pulled into the lot. Headlights swept the yard as Harlan Vega's sedan rolled in behind me. Sheriff Cal Danner followed in a cruiser, lights off. 3 of us against the circus. Harlan stepped out first, coat buttoned, folders tucked under one arm. I nodded once. He nodded back. No talk needed. Dale noticed us, froze for a heartbeat, then raised his voice. "You're trespassing, Morgan. This is private property." "Still half mine," I said, walking forward. "Not for long." He puffed up the way men do when they sense ground shifting under their feet. "You can't just barge in here like some big shot. We're moving product, got a delivery deadline." Harlan stopped a few feet away, opened his folder and held out the top sheet. "Delivery's canceled," he said evenly. "By court order, Judge Kendall's TTRO enjoins any sale, storage, or removal pending hearing," Harlan said. "And the DA signed out the arrest warrant on the forged refi." Dale blinked, confused for half a second before reading the heading. Temporary injunction, fraud investigation. Behind him, Jace lifted his phone. "Filming," he said. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is how greed destroys family businesses. The city sun comes home to ruin what we built." The sheriff folded his arms. "Keep your distance, son. I'm documenting this," Jay said, backing away slightly. "For transparency." Claire's voice cracked. "Grant, please, you're killing us. You'll ruin everything Dale worked for." I took the folder from Harlan, pulled out 3 documents, and handed them to Danner. Injunction, artisan clause, original signatures from Samuel Morgan, certified by county records and witnessed by Marianne Holt. I glanced at Dale, every one of them binding. Harlan opened a second folder and started reading the summary. Short and precise. Forgery of co-owner's name, misappropriation of restoration funds, and unlawful refinance under false pretenses. You diverted the money through private accounts, Mr. Rohr. We've traced it. Dale's face went red, then purple. "That's my company. You can't—" "This is slander." "No," Harlan said calmly. "It's evidence." Jace moved closer, camera still rolling. "He's lying. None of this is true. Grant's jealous. He couldn't handle real business." I turned to the lens and held my ground. "This isn't greed. It's protection. My father built this place with his hands. You tried to sell it with your mouth." Sheriff Danner didn't raise his voice. "You can keep recording, but that footage is evidence. Send a copy to my office now." Jace nodded, suddenly quiet. The calm hit harder than shouting. Dale lunged forward, finger jabbing the air. "You think you're smarter than me? You come back after running away and expect respect, you'll get nothing." "I already have everything that matters," I said. Sheriff Danner held up the signed warrant. "Probable cause on the forged refinance and diverted funds," he said. "We're doing this by the book. Dale Rohr, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of funds." He motioned to the 2 workers. "Step aside." Dale laughed high and ugly. "You can't do this. Claire, tell them this is our company." Claire didn't move. Her hands trembled. "Dale, please." He spun toward her. "Don't you start." The sheriff took that moment to move in. The cuffs clicked. Dale twisted, shouting, "You'll regret this, Morgan." The sheriff's grip tightened, guiding him toward the cruiser. I didn't respond. The composure was the insult. Claire's voice broke behind me. "Grant, what have you done?" I turned. Her mascara streaked down her face, rain catching in her hair. "You've destroyed your family." "For what?" "Pride. You're just like him, cold, stubborn, impossible to love." I looked her in the eye. "No, I'm like him because I build things that last. You chose a gambler over a craftsman, a fantasy over truth. Don't ask me to carry your choices." She flinched, then ripped off the gold band on her finger and threw it at me. It hit my chest, fell into the gravel. I didn't move to pick it up. I left it where it fell. Around us, the noise quieted. Locals had gathered at the fence, neighbors, former crew, a few who'd read the paper. They watched the sheriff load Dale into the cruiser. The word forgery traveled down the line like current. Heads turned. The story started rewriting itself right there on the gravel lot. Dale shouted from the back seat. "You'll see, I made this place worth something." The door slammed, cutting him off. Jay stood near the trailer, pale, jaw locked. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You have no idea what's coming." "Then make it good," I said, "because this was easy." He glared, then climbed into his car and peeled out, tires spitting rocks. Claire sank onto the trailer's edge, shoulders shaking. I almost pitied her, then didn't. Harlan touched my arm lightly. "We'll need you at the clerk's office at 9, he said. "Statement and copies. I'll be there." We walked back to our vehicles. The crowd still stared, whispering. I caught one of the older fishermen nodding once in my direction. Word spreads fast in the small town, faster when truth finally surfaces. The sheriff drove off first, the cruiser's lights washing the gray building red and blue. Dale's voice carried faintly before the sound faded into the distance. Jay stood near the trailer, phone still in his hand, face drained of color. The workers had slipped away, leaving him alone in the gravel yard. 2 deputies approached. "Need you to come in for questioning, son?" one said. Jace nodded, smirking just enough to fake control. "Sure, anything to clear this up." They didn't cuff him, just walked him to a separate car. He came voluntarily. They logged it that way. Cameras from a few locals caught the whole thing. By noon, the clip was online. Comments turned fast. People quoting the part where I said, "My father built this place with his hands." Jay's old promo videos filled the threads like punchlines. By evening, he was back on the street. No charges, just reputation ash. Investors pulled out within hours. His phone buzzed nonstop, then went silent. He deleted his accounts the next day. When I drove past the harbor that week, his car was gone. Someone said he'd caught a bus to Boston talking about starting over. Maybe he believed it. But as I looked in the rear view, I caught sight of a flyer still taped to a post. His face beside the Roar Marine logo. Wind peeled it half off. That's how it ends for men like him. Noise, then silence. He wasn't finished, though. I could feel it. People like Jace never know when to quit. Weeks later, the headlines hit. Roar pleads guilty to fraud and forgery. Sentence pending, assets seized. As part of the settlement, Claire signed over her half. Harland walked the deed to the clerk. The stamp hit before noon. Another article called her a cooperating witness. She'd moved in with Marianne. Started therapy. I hoped it stuck. Between Dad's half from probate and hers by quitclaim, title was clean. Mine. One foggy morning, I walked through the lot. The Roar Marine sign dangled by a single bolt, squeaking. I tore it down, threw it in the truck bed. The name Morgan Boats would rise again, but it had to earn it. Inside, gray paint smothered the oak. The air stank of resin. I pried open a can of stripper and got to work. The gold came back in streaks. Wood breathing again under my hands. I scraped until my arms burned, sanded until the boards went smooth. I replaced every bolt with marine-grade steel, checked each by wrist torque. The floor was warped from resin spills. I jacked it level inch by inch, listening to the wood settle like it was exhaling. Days blurred into rhythm. Grind, wipe, rebuild. I bled once, taped the knuckle and kept going. Cursed once, then laughed at myself. The sound echoed back, the shop remembering what real work felt like. Word traveled fast that the workshop was alive. One morning, I found 3 men at the door. Walt Kenny, my father's old foreman, and 2 retirees who used to shape keels here decades ago. They didn't knock. Walt just said, "Heard you finally came home." I handed him a scraper. He nodded and started on the next beam. The others followed. No talk of the past, no questions, just work. We rebuilt the benches first. Walt cut mortises like he'd never stopped. The retirees oiled the clamps, adjusted the lighting. Their presence filled the gaps between hammer strikes, the quiet kind of brotherhood that doesn't need words. By the second week, the town's tone changed. People stopped glaring when I walked into the diner. Someone left a thermos of coffee at the door one morning. A teenager dropped off a box of old photos. Boats my father had built. Families posing on the decks, small gestures, quiet apologies. The narrative had turned itself over through simple proof. The shop looked different now, lighter, honest again. One afternoon, while re-leveling a section of the main floor, my hammer hit something hollow. I paused, pried up a plank, and found a small compartment tucked into the subfloor. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. I unrolled it carefully. My father's chisels, handles worn smooth, his wooden mallet, the one he'd used on every frame he ever built, a brass marking gauge etched with his initials. At the bottom, a sealed envelope. I sat on the floor and opened it. The paper was thick, the handwriting firm. "If you came back, The place needed you more than the world did. Build what stands storms. When you don't know what to do the next right thing, Dad. That was all. No long farewell, no apology, just instruction, exactly how he spoke. I pressed the page flat against the floor, ran my hand over the grain, and stayed still for a moment. The compass in my pocket settled when it shifted. Then I put the tools back in their roll, sealed it, and set it on the bench where it belonged. Work waited. By evening, the oak beams glowed under fresh oil. The air smelled like cedar again. The windows were open, the sea breeze came through without the taste of resin. For the first time in years, the building sounded right. Hammer, rasp, footsteps, silence. 6 months later, the schooner was ready. She caught the morning light like polished steel, floating proud on the tide. The workshop behind her wore its new sign, straight and true. The Samuel Morgan Institute of Artisan Craft. For the first time in years, the place smelled right. Cedar, salt, and varnish, not resin and lies. The crowd gathering on the dock was small but solid. Walt Kenny, a few of the old crew, my aunt, even some of the townspeople who once called me a traitor. They didn't have to say anything. Showing up was enough. Tessa Vaughn from the paper stood near the railing, notebook in hand. She gave me a nod. I already knew the headline she'd write. Morgan Legacy Restored. I didn't make a speech. I checked ropes, bolts, and ballast. My father used to say attention was the cheapest form of respect. I gave the boat mine. Then I heard a car door shut behind me. My mother stood at the edge of the dock. Plain jacket, small wooden box in her hands. No makeup, no posture, just honest nerves. I don't expect forgiveness, she said quietly. I just wanted to see what you rebuilt. I studied her a second. You didn't expect I'd finish what he started either. She nodded. I let someone smaller than me shrink my life. I believed him because it was easier than facing what I lost. Forgive me, son. I looked her in the eyes. I forgive you, Mom, but I won't forget what it cost. Her shoulders eased. She handed me the box. Inside was Dad's pocket knife and an old photo of the three of us. I set it beside his chisels on the workbench. Now it's where it belongs, I said. Harlan showed up with his briefcase, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. Dale took the plea, he said. 7 years minimum, no appeal. I nodded once. And Jace? Selling cheap rock marine kits online, already falling apart. Some men build storms for themselves, I said. He smiled faintly. You sound like your father. The dock went quiet as I climbed aboard the schooner. Walt tossed me the rope and I eased it free. The hull slid into the water, the sound deep and clean. Walt grinned. Your dad would have liked this. He'd want to see if it floats first, I said. Laughter broke the silence. The crowd clapped as the boat steadied flawlessly. For a moment it felt like the whole town exhaled. That's when the engine sound broke it. An old car grinding up the hill. I didn't even need to turn to know. Jay stepped out, thinner, hair grown out, eyes wild. He walked straight down the dock, shouting before he reached us. You think this makes you better? You ruined everything, me, my dad, the name. People froze. Claire looked terrified. I met him halfway. No, I said, it makes me finished. He got closer, spitting the words. You cost me everything. You sold it yourself. I swung my arm, sidestepping him. His punch came sloppy, more anger than aim. I caught his wrist, held it just long enough for everyone to see who had control, then let go. This is your last free lesson, I told him. Real men build, they don't beg. Sheriff Danner's voice came from behind the crowd. Walk away, Roar. Jace's breath came ragged. He stared at me like he wanted to speak, then turned and stumbled back toward his car. Gravel sprayed as he drove off. Harlan joined me, quiet. You handled that better than a courtroom. Court's for punishment, I said. I'm after peace. By dusk, the crowd had gone. The schooner rocked gently on the tide, the sky burning down to gold. I went back inside the workshop. The air hummed with quiet. No shouting, no deals, no ghosts. Just work waiting to be done. I opened the box again, set Dad's pocket knife beside his letter and compass. The pieces of his life finally back where they belonged. Outside, Claire stood near Marianne's car. Thank you for letting me be here, she said. Thank you for showing up, I replied. She nodded once, then left. The taillights faded into the curve of the Bay Road. I locked the workshop doors and stood under the new sign. The wind carried the scent of sawdust and salt again. The schooner glowed faintly under the moonlight, a shape meant to outlast storms. Dad used to say, "You don't measure success by what you earn. It's by what still stands after you're gone." I looked at the boat, the shop, the sign, and said quietly, "He built the foundation. I built the fortress, and this time it'll stand." YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.